1985, they were involved in such high-level drug dealers with such groups as the West End Gang and the Mafia, groups that require professionalism from their business associates, that they basically decide we have to decide our future here. If we're going to grow and become the businessman we want to be, we have to get rid of this whole unruly aspect as part of our group.
And that's the sound where our story starts. On September 8th, 1983, Yves Buteau, the Canadian president of the Hells Angels, was shot to death. He was meeting with a member of Kitchener's Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club.
Je suis fier et orgueilleux de la population de Québec parce qu'à travers les nuages du chaos économique, il est consolable de constater que la province de Québec va en l'air et la province de Québec donne des éléments et des garanties de stabilité et de sécurité.
The years between 1936 and 1960s is known as La Grande Noirceur, the Great Darkness. In this period, Quebec was ruled by an ultra-conservative Catholic authority, starting with the 1960s provincial election, which saw this union destroyed by the Liberals. The province started to experience sweeping changes that transformed it from one of the most conservative societies in North America to being the most liberal today. This was in part a reaction after centuries of abuse and oppression of Quebecers at the hands of religion and state ruling hand to hand. One of the consequences? A generation of unruly, rebellious men. Hundreds of French Canadians flocked to biker clubs. By 1968, there were a total of 350 motorcycle clubs and growing. One result of having so many was an astounding number of conflicts for control over drug territory. At the time, no other province had a territory under so many different criminal groups. And it's in this historical context that the Popeyes Outlaw Motorcycle Club rode to the top of the biker world. Crime journalist James Dubois, who has interviewed many full-patch bikers, is quoted as saying, "There's always been more violence in Quebec. In the biker world, it's known as the Red Zone. I remember an outlaw hitman telling me he was scared of going to Montreal." A total of 35 members were believed to have patched over from the Popeyes to the Hells Angels on December 5th, 1977. But not all was fine and dandy. In the 80s, Buteau had temporarily withdrawn from Ontario and was almost exclusively focused on the Quebec market. Also, their enemies were as ruthless in other provinces. But by 1983, a few seconds before his murder, Buteau was negotiating with a leader of Satan's Choice, who had driven to Longueuil from Kitchener, Ontario. Frenchie had arrived in town to negotiate with the Hells Angels. Fortunately or unfortunately, his plans succeeded without him, as both Frenchie and Buteau died at the hands of a 22-year-old shooter, Gino Gaudreau, prospect with the rival MC, their formidable nemesis, the Outlaws. You see, Gino believed taking out the national president of the Hells Angels would propel him to full patch status. But it was not always business as usual. Before his death, Buteau had a heart-to-heart with his brothers, explaining that he had a bigger vision for their brotherhood. He declared that it was time to reorganize and, more importantly, tighten the discipline. In fact, the extreme partying lifestyle had to come to an end, and so he made it punishable by death for any member caught using hard drugs. However, this did not lead to any meaningful changes, as members of the North were a rowdy bunch. In fact, most of them were what you'd call the stereotypical biker of the 60s. Their rash behavior and gratuitous violence towards civilians would attract a lot of law enforcement attention. And so Buteau convenes a meeting and reprimands the North for not being profitable enough, and also for attracting law enforcement attention. In fact, 2 of its members were under investigation for a string of prostitute killings.
Règne sans partage sur un royaume bâti avec les profits de la vente de stupéfiants. La fête en question survient alors qu'une guerre d'usure commence entre la police et les motards.
And lastly, members had incurred heavy cocaine debts from the king of cocaine, Frankie Dunes Ryan. Evidently, regular payments were not being made on time. Furthermore, more criminal organizations like the Italian Mafia were complaining of the excesses of the North Chapter, and so Buteau laid down the law. It would become forbidden to use cocaine on punishment of death. Fun and games was over. It was time to take the hells from a group of neckbeards to sophisticated businessmen with a knack for narcotics trafficking. On September 12, 1983, a funeral was held in a church in Sorel-Tracy. It was estimated that there were 2,000 onlookers, including 150 members of the Hells Angels from all over Canada, the US, England, and elsewhere, who rode in procession from Sorel to Drummondville. And in the end, Buteau shares a gravestone with fellow member Adrien Fleury, aka Pistache. And with this, Sky Langlois replaces Yves Buteau as national president of the Canadian Angels. On March 1st, 1978, Buteau dispatches his favorite assassin, Yves Trudeau. Trudeau had joined the Popeyes in 1968 and was one of the founding members of the Hells in Canada. Standing 5'6" and 135 pounds made Trudeau stand out from your typical enforcer. Trudeau was a force to be reckoned with a total of 43 assassinations under his belt. Committed to the cause, he even worked at an explosive factory, thereby learning the deadly art of bomb making. Trudeau's efficiency and brutality earned him contracts with the West End gang. As such, he was not only a killing machine, he was also a junkie whose habit fueled a desperate need for cash, which he mainly earned through murders. Trudeau had in fact become the Hells Angels' most prized assassin. Things were looking so good for him that he even broke away from the Montreal chapter in order to form the Northern chapter only a dozen kilometers away. Although they were generating revenue, it was apparent that they were ripping off the other chapters from profits. It was no secret these ex-Popeyes members were more interested in partying than lining up to the expansion plans of the Hells Angels. Also not helping their case was the amount of unwanted media attention that the North was generating. In the eyes of the South chapter, brothers like Trudeau had been running amok for a very long time. And so it's in this setting that he meets David the Wolf Caroll in Halifax in order to retrieve a payment for a contract murder that he had just completed. He admits to his comrade that he really needed the money to buy himself some coke. This was an odd thing to say. Shouldn't Trudeau be kicking up 25% to his clubhouse first? This did not sit well with David Caroll, whose Halifax chapter was still on a come-up financially. To the Wolf, that $98,000 paid for the hit was not easy to come by. The reputation of the North chapter had hit a new low. Trudeau was the top enforcer after all. If he was unreliable, then what does that say about the other brothers? Brothers skimming brothers for resources. That was not good. And in a twist of fate, where one moment can change the course of history, the destiny of 5 ex-Popeyes members was decided when a furious wolf comes howling by the South Chapter's president.